Growing up in Britain back in the 1960s came with its own sounds, smells, and tiny traditions that stitched an entire generation together in ways today's children would barely recognize. The school day wasn't ruled by screens, apps, algorithms, or notifications. It was ruled by the rise and fall of a handbell, by the scrape of wooden chairs on old floors, by the echo of shoes down a long corridor, and by the unmistakable authority of teachers who seemed carved out of stone. It was a world where rules were simple, discipline was constant, and classrooms carried a kind of quiet grandeur, equal parts terrifying and wonderfully familiar. Here are 20 classroom moments from 1960s Britain that only real Brits will remember. Small rituals, big shocks, and unforgettable routines that shaped childhood in ways we only truly appreciate now. Number 1. The cane hanging in plain sight. For many children in Britain during the early and mid-1960s, the cane wasn't a myth, a rumor, or an empty warning. It was right there, often propped in the corner of the room, resting against the teacher's desk, or placed deliberately where every eye could see it. The cane held an authority all of its own. It rarely needed to be used for it to work. Simply seeing it was enough to encourage perfect posture and absolute silence. The classroom could be buzzing with whispered conversations one moment, but the second a teacher's finger tapped the cane, the entire room transformed. Children sat straighter, breath slowed, and everyone tried to look as innocent as possible. Today, such a sight would shut down a school and send parents marching into meetings. But in the 1960s, it was simply the shadow that kept order. Number 2. Standing up the moment the teacher walked in. There was no debate, no dragging your feet, no sighing. You stood. The instant the door handle turned and the teacher entered the room, every child rose from their chair in a sort of choreographed ritual that felt both formal and strangely comforting. Shoes scraped, chairs clattered, and a wave of respect swept through the room as if everyone had silently agreed on the rules generations before. It didn't matter if you were mid-sentence, halfway through eating an illicit sweet, or deep in conversation with your neighbor. Everything stopped. Today's classrooms might emphasize informality and natural communication, but back then, standing up wasn't just expected. It was woven into the rhythm of the school day. And somehow, it made the moment the teacher began the lesson feel almost ceremonial. Number 3. Outdoor PE in any weather, and we mean any weather. If the teacher said PE outside, then outside you went, whether it was raining, snowing, hailing, or blowing so fiercely that your shorts flapped like sails. The 1960s held a kind of stoic determination when it came to physical education. Cold builds character, mud is harmless, and shivering is simply part of the experience. Children dashed across concrete yards with red legs, slippery plimsolls, and woolen jumpers that soaked up twice their weight in water. By today's standards, it would be described as unsafe, impractical, and borderline medieval. But at the time, it was normal, expected, and even a bit thrilling. There was something oddly unifying about lining up in the cold, cheeks stinging, waiting for the whistle to blow. Number 4. Needlework for girls, woodwork for boys. Classrooms in the 1960s were divided not only by age, but by unwritten expectations. Girls threaded needles, darned hems, and stitched samplers under the watchful eye of a teacher who could spot a crooked seam from 10 feet away. Boys, meanwhile, were marched off to woodwork rooms filled with the smell of sawdust and the echo of blunt tools hitting mismatched blocks of pine. Nobody questioned it. It was simply the way things were. Girls left the classroom with pricked fingers and half-stitched handkerchiefs. Boys left with lopsided birdhouses and splinters they refused to show anyone. Today, we might call it rigid or outdated, but back then, it felt perfectly ordinary. Number 5. Mental arithmetic drills. No calculators, no excuses. Before calculators, before smartphones, before even pocket-sized digital clocks, mental arithmetic ruled the classroom. Teachers would fire questions like rapid-fire arrows. What's 9 times 7? Halve 38? Add 43 and 27. Quickly! Every student knew that hesitation wasn't an option. You either answered confidently or risked the entire class turning to look at you in that painful silence. Chalk rattled against the board as teachers scribbled long sums with the speed of magicians. And if you dared to count on your fingers, well, you'd better hide them under the desk. The whole ritual felt intense at the time, but now it has its own nostalgic charm, a reminder of how sharp our minds used to be when quick maths wasn't something you asked your phone to do. Number 6. The television on wheels arriving like a celebrity. If you grew up in a 1960s classroom, you can still picture the moment. The door opens, a teacher appears, and behind them is the clunky, glowing promise of joy. The school television. It rolled into the classroom on a giant trolley that always squeaked, carrying a screen no bigger than a shoebox, but powerful enough to make an entire class gasp with excitement. Educational films, nature documentaries, space missions, or anything that counted as visual learning became the highlight of the day. The lights dimmed, the room fell silent, and everyone leaned forward as though witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime event. Even the teachers loved it. It was a slice of magic in an otherwise routine day. Number 7. Milk crates in the hallway, sometimes frozen, sometimes warm. School milk was a staple of childhood, lined up in neat crates outside the classroom door. In winter, the foil caps froze and popped off, leaving tiny milk volcanoes that amused everyone except the teacher. In summer, the bottles warmed under the morning sun, producing a smell that lingered in the corridor long after break time. Children accepted it without complaint. It was simply part of the school day. Today, a warm bottle of milk would cause uproar, but back then, you shook it, poked the foil, drank it, and got on with your day. Number 8. Wooden desks with lift-up lids. Those desks were more than furniture. They were personal treasure chests. Under each lid lived pencil cases, half-used rubbers, lost marbles, broken rulers, secret notes, and the occasional crumb-covered biscuits someone forgot to eat. The creak of the lid lifting, the slam of it closing, the satisfying clatter inside. These were sounds that defined the school day. Sometimes a teacher would instruct everyone to open their desks for a tidy up, which usually revealed a level of chaos even the children were shocked by. Today's modern desks might be sleek and practical, maar ze hebben niet dezelfde ziel. Number 9. The single handbell. Long before electronic tones or automated announcements, there was only one signal that governed movement: the teacher's handbell. The high, sharp ring of brass carried across playgrounds, corridors, and classrooms with a kind of old-world authority. Children froze mid-sentence, teachers stopped mid-step, and everyone naturally formed neat lines without being told twice. It was simple, efficient, and strangely comforting, the sound that opened and closed the chapters of each school day. Number 10. The single telephone in the hallway. If a parent had to call the school, or the school needed to call home, it happened at one telephone, usually sitting on a tiny table in a drafty corridor. It rang loudly, echoing through the entire building, and everyone instinctively turned their heads. Teachers approached it with the same seriousness as answering a royal summons. For children, the sound of that telephone could mean anything: a forgotten lunch, a sick sibling, or, much scarier, being summoned unexpectedly. Today, schools run on emails, apps, group chats, and automated messages. But in the 1960s, everything filtered through that single receiver. Number 11. School dinners. The cabbage, the custard, the unforgettable smell. British school dinners of the 1960s were a universe of their own. The smell drifted through corridors long before lunchtime. Boiled cabbage, mashed potatoes, shepherd's pie that tasted slightly different every day, custard thick enough to coat the back of a spoon, and the ever-mysterious pink sponge that appeared once a week. Some children loved it, some dreaded it, but everyone remembers it. Today's children have choices, dietary options, allergy sheets, and themed menus. In the 60s, you sat, you ate what arrived on the tray, and you were grateful if it came with extra custard. Number 12. Singing hymns every morning. Assembly wasn't optional, and neither was singing. Rows of children filled the hall, hands behind backs, voices rising in hymns that carried through the building. Even children who barely whispered still mouthed the words. It didn't matter whether you understood the meaning. It was the ritual that mattered. Teachers watched from the side, head teachers stood proudly at the front, and the polished floor echoed with uniform sound. Today's assemblies might feature PowerPoints, guest speakers, or motivational talks, but nothing matches the old rhythm of hundreds of voices rising together. Number 13. Register time. The silent wait for your name. Every morning began with the same quiet ritual: the register. The teacher read each name, the room held its breath, and each child responded in the softest, "Here, miss," or "present" imaginable. Late arrivals slipped in with an apologetic shuffle, hoping their names hadn't been called yet. It was a small, simple moment, but it set the tone for the day: orderly, calm, and predictable. Today's digital attendance systems may be faster, maar ze hebben niets van de charme. Number 14. Times tables chanting. 2 2s are 4, 2 3s are 6. The rhythmic chanting of times tables filled classrooms across the country, echoing through open windows into the world outside. The entire class moved as one voice, reciting numbers faster and faster until the teacher decided everyone could stop. There was no escape, no alternative method, no calculator safety net, just repetition, discipline, and the hope that your brain would absorb it. And somehow, it did. Number 15. Punishments that seem unbelievable today. Not the cane, that was its own category. This was the everyday set of punishments: face in the wall, standing outside the door in shame, writing lines for what felt like an eternity, or holding heavy books at arm's length until your arms shook. None of it would make it past a school policy meeting today, but back then, they were as routine as break time. Number 16. The teacher's coffee breath leaning over your shoulder. There was always that moment when a teacher leaned in close to inspect your work, bringing with them the unmistakable scent of coffee, mints, or the last cigarette they smoked just before class. It could be comforting or terrifying depending on the teacher, but it was always memorable. Today, teachers keep their distance. Back then, they lived in your personal space. Number 17. Cold classrooms and drafty windows. Before modern insulation and reliable heating, 1960s classrooms were often chilly, especially during winter mornings. Children rubbed their hands together, breathed into them for warmth, and wore woolen jumpers that never quite did the job. Teachers sometimes allowed coats during lessons, a rare kindness that lives vividly in many memories. Today, classrooms aim for comfort. Back then, survival came first. Number 18. The smell of wet coats in the cloakroom. A sensory memory that no one ever forgets. Rain-soaked wool, damp shoes, steamed-up windows. The cloakroom in winter was an experience of its own. The smell hit you like a wall, thick and earthy, and it lingered all day. It might sound unpleasant, but for many, it's one of the most nostalgic scents of childhood. Number 19. The end-of-day satchel scramble. The moment the bell rang, children surged towards the cloakroom in a chaotic wave of laughter, chatter, and clattering buckles. Satchels bumped against legs, jumpers fell to the floor, lunch boxes were scooped up in a rush, and the excitement of freedom filled the room. There was nothing tidy about it, but it was a moment that signaled the best part of the day: the walk home, the fresh air, and the sense of release. Number 20. Chalk dust everywhere. The final image of a 1960s classroom is simple. Chalk. On desks, on jumpers, floating in the sunlight, clinging to sleeves and coating the blackboard ledge in soft white powder. Teachers wiped their hands on their skirts or trousers after every sum. Erasers puffed clouds of dust into the air, and every child occasionally wondered what chalk actually tasted like, though most wisely chose not to find out. Today's whiteboards and tablets offer clean convenience, but they'll never replace the atmosphere of those chalk-filled rooms. These were the moments that shaped school life in 1960s Britain, ordinary at the time, unforgettable now. They were strict and structured, sometimes harsh, sometimes hilarious, always deeply human. And though the world has changed in extraordinary ways, these memories remain stitched into the hearts of those who lived them. Which of these classroom moments do you remember most? And which one would shock people today the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgic journeys through Britain's past.